My writing, as long as it's to a reader, it's not mine anymore.
I really don't see art as the end point. I see it as the rearranging.
When you make publicly engaged art,
Sure.
how do you measure the success of it?
700 hours, one painting, and it ended up being the worst of the whole series.
You're making portraits of every single woman in the world.
Everyone.
How?
Thought-provoking insights, sparking intellectual curiosity. Tune in, transcend the ordinary, and get nuanced.
Hi, so we are here at Alliance University at one of the beautiful lawns that we have, and we're students of MA Creative Writing. I'm Aizaz, that's Keerthana, this is Immane, and we are here having a lovely conversation with Dr. Layton, who teaches art at University of Rochester.
Yes.
And the art she works with focus on socially engaged art. There's art diplomacy and there's interdisciplinary art. It's great, good to have you, ma'am.
So happy to be here. I'm thrilled to be here.
So modern art per se is something that is debatable and questionable. So I wanted to ask you, would you define art, and what is it that you consider art?
I would say, in terms of defining art, I don't think of it as much about a physical object. Like, I don't think of it as about the sculpture or the video or the painting, etc. I think of it as the process to getting to that point. So when I look at, it's the rearranging of the raw materials that exist. The creativity in the process is the part that I think is artistic.
It's like the journey more than the destination.
Yes, and it's like, if you think of it, you have paint in a tube, and then you have the painting on the other side. And the way I see it is that the paint is not art. I think we can agree on that part. And on the other side, that doesn't feel like art either. The part that feels like art is where you take that raw material and you reorganize it, because that's where the artist is coming in and saying, okay, I see this means nothing in its tube, and now I have this canvas, or I have this blank that means nothing. How can I rearrange these materials to give them meaning? And I'm just gonna freeze them here. That meaning just gets frozen as the sculpture or as the painting. So I actually don't see art as the end point. I see it as the rearranging.
Some artists would also argue that, some philosophers would argue that paint in a tube can be
Sure.
considered art.
Fair. Fair, absolutely fair.
So what would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a broad term that you could use that word, like the art of cooking, the art of kindness, the art. You could use that word to describe a lot of different things. So it's just kind of knowing the topic that you're talking about, knowing how you're using it. But yes, it's one of those words you can use for a whole lot of different things.
On the line of that, what do you think of the idea of arts for art's sake?
Arts for art's sake, yes. Yes, yes. Anytime that we could be making art, make art. Anytime, in any way. Like signing your name, as good a drawing as all drawings. So anytime you can make it. There are so many different reasons that people make art. And for each individual, it's going to serve a different purpose. So I'm definitely not in the camp of saying everyone has to make art that in some way changes the world. That's one type of art, but I don't think that that's even better or worse than other types. So someone who has children at home, they may make art that can be done in like knitting or beading, or something that can be picked up real quickly and put down quickly, picked up for 5 minutes, put down. That type of art will serve that person differently than the type of art that I make, that I really try to engage people in more global issues, personal issues. I don't see one as being better than the other. I see it as what your intention is. My career is making art, and other people, that is their source of relaxation or their source of creative discovery or commercial profit. Their job is in advertising or industrial design. So many ways people do it. I just happen to make it for social justice, social equity reasons.
As far as social, making art for social justice, political art and whatnot.
Yeah.
When you make publicly engaged art,
Sure.
how do you measure the success of it? Like, do you do you have to check how much of an audience you're getting, how much exposure has it had? What is it?
So when I'm making socially engaged art, first it's thinking about what type of socially engaged art, or what you're thinking that is. So when I'm thinking of socially engaged art, it is working with equal power, no hierarchy, working with community organizations that have expressed certain needs or facing certain obstacles or challenges. They have the expertise, you bring an artist and you work together to figure out what are our pre-existing resources, how can we use creative problem solving to alleviate some of those challenges, to somehow make things better, that through our different careers, our different levels of expertise, areas of expertise, we can make it easier in our community for everyone and meet the people, meet the needs of the community members we're serving. So in that sense, it's not going to be like a gallery exhibition, or it's not going to be external indicators that determine its success. It's going to be success defined by the people who are involved as participants. Does it bring them meaning, or the recipients of the solutions or the work that we've done? If it brings them meaning, if it alleviates some of those challenges, then it's a successful project.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's your job. We're both doing the same thing. We're like trying to communicate messages in ways that very busy people on the other side are going to take a moment to slow down and listen. Yeah.
Does it ever happen to you that the ones you're presenting your art to don't get it? And is there any kind of annoyance there? How do you feel?
Man, question after, these are like my favorite. This is like the list of my favorite questions. I would say that I don't have any control over the art that I make once I let it go into the world. And no one owes me anything as an artist, absolutely nothing. And we each have such different contexts, such different experiences, perspectives that we're working with, that I put the art, I'll build this art thing, and then everyone will approach it through the doors they want to approach it. And I don't think I've ever been in a circumstance where I've said, oh, they didn't get it, they just don't understand. Because that's not really for me to say. I make the work with my understanding and hope. The ideal is that people come in at with different perspectives, because then I can learn about how they're seeing it and why they're seeing it that way.
As a poet, I always say that, poet, I always say that my writing, as long as it's to a reader, it's not mine anymore.
Right. Once you let it go, And then it becomes public. And then it becomes, the art lives on as long as people are engaging, discussing. And you're human. Does it feel great if you make something and other people respond in positive ways and get some type of enjoyment and relay that to you or find meaning in it? We're all human, that feels great, but it's not why I make art, or it's not necessarily determining how successful it was or not. And sometimes you don't know right on the spot, and now they're more relevant and interesting than they were then.
Is there any particular art piece like that for you?
I would say, yeah. Yes, they kind of go, I don't know if it's like any type of thing that you could graph, but they certainly come in and out of relevance maybe. And coping mechanisms, I started that project shortly after Trump was elected last time. And so it was by no coincidence that we are here. And I was doing a workshop on coping mechanisms just a couple of days ago, just days after Trump was elected second time. And I think without that, I don't know that coping mechanisms, it reminds me of why I made them, and that these may be needed again, punctuation mark, will be needed again. And in the workshop, it was so interesting to me to see how students came up with their own coping mechanisms, because by designing those in the class and in the workshop, I was able to see what students here at Alliance, what their hopes are, what they care about, what they worry about, what they wish for, what they hope for. And some of them are exactly like that of my friends and family and colleagues at home, and some were unique to being here. But yeah, that one I think is going to become incredibly relevant again, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Does it ever happen to you that there are two, so you make art you make political art, right? Does it ever happen to you that there is art from maybe the other side, essentially? And so that's a concern I have. Like, okay, what if I'm wrong about this thing that I really want to work on? So,
Yes.
what if they are right?
Yeah. My fear, yes, absolutely. I think anytime you are making work in the political realm, like I'm not making landscapes that will generally not be offensive in any way to anyone, generally. When I'm working in the political realm, I do have to be far more responsible for what I'm saying, because people out there are impacted in very personal ways by the issues that I'm talking about. And so I feel like I have to do more research, be more responsible, be better educated, understand perspectives unlike my own, so that I'm not accidentally I'm not thinking, oh, I'm doing this great thing, realizing that I'm actually hurting or offending the people that and so and when it's in public, you're working with real people and their lives, and my intentions don't matter. So if I'm painting landscapes, my intentions matter. Political art, socially engaged art, they just don't. It's the reactions and the interpretations of the people. One thing I have learned that may help answer that question is, if I'm telling my own story alone, I can never be wrong. I can never be boring, wrong, or cliche if I'm telling my own story. You have to be really careful. I have to be really careful if in any part of my art I'm starting to speak for someone else, and they should be credited in the exhibition. I just make sure I get that story right and they have credit, because otherwise that can do some damage. Yep, that can be hard.
Yeah, so while talking about putting the artwork out to public, so media has become one of the major um, ways to connect to the public. So unlike traditional media, which had very few platforms like television and stuff, so the media landscape today has been fragmented into various outlets like social media platforms and stuff like that. So how does this split in the audience affect the reach of the artwork?
Yes, I think it's one of the best things that's happened, because it's such a far more democratic art form now, because now you don't have to get into a museum, you don't have to be accepted by a gallery to exhibit your work, you don't have to have funding to be able to set yourself up, you don't have to have the degree that would get you to XYZ. Now with social media, that if I have an exhibition in a gallery, you're lucky that X amount of people are going to come. When I put it on social media, thousands of people, that's the gallery space there. So I'd say I don't want, there is something very different about going to a museum, to a gallery, to a public, to an art space and seeing the actual tangible artwork that you can touch, feel, smell, taste. So I would never want to give up on that experience, and they're doing incredible work. Proliferation of media, each one is the reason it's there is because it's reaching a different audience, and another audience is using it. And that just helps visual communication and creative communication reach that many more people. It's a small section of society that visits museums on a regular basis. And the impact by adding social media to that it's unlimited.
Did the pandemic affect the reach of social media for artists in general and for you?
I think so, because we started making art that's maybe when I remember a big shift where we're making art for Instagram, we're making art for Facebook. So even the way you're thinking of artist statements, you're no longer thinking of it 8.5 by 11 printed sheet of paper. You're thinking of what is appropriate to write in a social media post. And people did really creative things, such as run series. I saw, some of my students were doing graphic novel type comic series and releasing one every Monday. One was going to be released online, something like that. So I think artists are adaptable creatures by nature. And so it's like, pandemic comes, it's horrible for everyone on earth, and artists are thinking, okay, how do we pivot? How do we use this now as our platform? And how can we reach this many more people? And teaching became different too. Like I have a colleague, Mijin Shin, she's a printmaker, and she started teaching printmaking online to the public, not to like password protected students, but to the public, teaching people how you can do printmaking with whatever you have at home. So like a classic example, she had like a pasta maker machine that you could do printing with. And so she ran a whole series while people are stuck at home in their houses, like for free, here's how you can do printmaking with your kids. Yeah.
So talking about the reach to the audience, what kind of mediums do you choose? Like, do you have a favorite medium, or does it depend on the message that the artwork conveys?
It depends on the message. So I very much, in my process, I'm not married to any particular medium. I don't even really enjoy one more than the other. I come up with a concept first, always, I think. 100% of the time, I think. I'll give myself a little room there. Come up with a concept, come up with kind of what this needs to communicate, what domain this should be in, and then visualize what is the best way to deliver, to start that conversation or deliver it. So if the easiest way is to just say it in words, I should just say it in words. But if it's something that I can't say in words, like that doesn't get to the heart of it, then you figure out, okay, what does that look like, taste like, sound like, smell like, touch like, and then come up with that. And then you have to figure out, or I should say, I have to figure out then how to build it. So there was one, an extreme one would be one that I did that in my mind ended up as an ice sculpture. And then it was, how do I build a 300 pounds ice sculpture? And in those cases, it's, I don't know how to do that. I'll never know how to do that. So I had to hire an artist to do the ice sculpture side of it. And I did the rest, all of it around it, came up with a design. I came up with the context and built the rest of it. But it always starts concept, and then if painting can do it best, I'll do it in painting. If it's performance, I'll do it that. If it's sculpture, if it's embroidery, if it, now I want to make clothing and jewelry that shows the inside, connects science and art. So it'll show our neurological systems, chemical systems through biology, neurology, that part of the sciences, but have them so that we're wearing them. So literally as dresses, I'm using my MRI scans. And as jewelry, I want to do a necklace down my spine in the back that shows what's happening in our spine as we move, as we walk, as we talk. So we're like aware of the inside and the outside. That's my next, spoiler alert. Yeah, that's my upcoming series, I think. Yes.
You have another piece of art. It's a love letter to every woman in the world.
Yes, all of them, every single one.
Which is like, it's big to think about. You're drawing so many, you're making portraits of every single woman in the world.
Everyone.
How?
I'm gonna make a portrait of every single woman in the world, and I'll just keep going until I die. Let's say. How am I gonna do that? I think that imagining that something can be true can be just as powerful as it being true. So if it were just always true that you could make a portrait of every woman in the world, like if that were just a given, then I don't know, it wouldn't resonate. But saying something that, I don't know, we could dream of that happening, and then who would those women be, and how beautiful it would be if every woman knew she was worthy of sitting down and having someone make a portrait because she was so beautiful and unique in her beauty and all of that, like that. The effect of imagining that is as powerful for me as actually being able to do it.
As artists, like you said, we all tend to live in an imagined reality more than we do in reality.
Yes, right.
Like you also said that you tend to use writing too in your, before you make the art. Like,
Yes.
what do you think of the relationship between writers and artists we're very interconnected.
So interconnected, and really I find it's all interconnected. Like engineering, you were saying your background's in engineering, and it's all like food practice, nutrition, science, every public policy, and certainly the natural world and zoology. Like it's all connected. I think at one point maybe we were taught that they were disconnected. Somewhere along the way we were taught that, and it was probably for reasons that had nothing to do with like knowledge or learning or living or problem solving. It had to do with like classroom space, or it had to do with like the library it needs covers. It can't just be a stack of hundreds of thousands of pieces of paper. We need to categorize in some way. But I think that we are all a lot more connected than we think, and that there may not even be boundaries between disciplines. It might be more of like an ebb and flow. But writers and artists, we are in the business of communication. So it's exactly what we do. It's just we do it through words, we do it through images, we do it through all different types of media, getting a message from one place to the next, having somebody engage in a way, engage in subject matter or an emotion or a feeling or information that they wouldn't have had they just gone upon their path that day. How do they stop? How do they take time to read your words, to look at my images? And that's a skill. That's the skill we practice. I think the skill we practice is more about communication necessarily than it is about the actual craftsmanship. Is really important to be able to do it, but the art comes in when we start figuring out how to communicate, how to rearrange those words, those concepts, those meanings into writing. Yeah.
Since we're in MA creative writing and you are a professor for a art course, it's a weird space to be in, right? Like, how do you teach art? How do you teach creative writing? Like,
I don't see myself as teaching art. I see myself as setting up problems and then supporting students on how do you solve this problem, as if I didn't make the problem, but coming up with a challenge, and then we can all come at it from a different angle, different perspective, bring our own experiences, the information we have, what we care about, what we worry about, what we hope for. And then then I just figure out how can I help students get to the vision that they want to see. So I can help offer all the experience I have. So I know how to paint. I know the technical parts of, some of sculpture, some of this, some of that. But I don't think I teach people how to make what they make.
Has there ever been an influence from your student in a way that made you drastically change a perspective on something?
Every day. Every day. Yeah, I would say it is an entirely fluid relationship. So I am offering what I can. I have 25 years of teaching experience, so I can offer that. I can offer systems of organization for making projects. I can do that type of thing. The knowledge I have, my background in artists, my experiences, my art making practice, but they bring everything to it. Everything they bring, I don't know anything about. So now that I'm here in India, I have a student at home, her independent study, she's taking 3 different forms of indigenous Indian art making forms. She's learning those 3, and then she's making 3 contemporary works of art based on autobiography that uses each one of those forms. I don't know anything about her story, and I also don't know about these indigenous Indian forms. She's bringing all of that. I'm going to learn from her. I can set it up and guide through based on the information I have. So it's always like meeting somewhere in the middle. I think it's where that's where the best education happens. Yes. I think, in my humble opinion, as an artist and as you are, as creative educators and makers and writers.
So as far as your art is concerned, what are you looking forward to? What is the ideal art that you want to make someday? Is there a magnum opus you're heading towards?
No.
Nothing?
No, nothing.
Nothing which is your...
What am I looking forward to? I hope that when I am 98 years old, I eat pretty healthy food, so I'm hoping 98 is my number. I'm hoping that I care as much about the world as I do now, And I hope that I'm still going to be exploring. So I'd say every work of art I'm making is just like, I try to be all in. With what I have at that time, I'm all in. But I'm working, it's in that context. And then something new happens, the world changes, my life changes in a year or two. Everything starts from scratch. So every time I start, I feel like I'm just starting from scratch. And I hope I'm gonna keep doing that. So if I feel like if I got somewhere where I was like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever made, like the rest of life would be a disappointment, right? So I'm not even, yeah, it wouldn't, I don't think I ever want to get to the point where I make something and say this is the best I can do.
Yeah, and like you said, it's the journey more
Yes.
than the destination. Like in the beginning, what you said, is there a way that you think to yourself, okay, if I put in this much effort, then this is what I've been kind of aspiring to make in some sense? Does that make sense? I don't know.
I think so.
Okay.
It doesn't, okay. It unfortunately for me, because I'm a really hard worker, and I'll put, the longest one I made was 700 hours went into one painting. So 700 hours, one painting, and it ended up being the worst of the whole series. So that's one thing I've learned is like the amount of effort I put in does not guarantee the value of how well it speaks to people at the end. That can be a very different thing. Yeah, so the effort, I'll always, always give it my best effort. Whatever form that looks, however that looks, I'll give it my best effort. Sometimes maybe that hits the mark, sometimes something new comes up, sometimes it's disappointing and I go nowhere, but it doesn't always, I don't know if there's a relationship between the amount of work I put in and the result. Yeah. And sometimes it's an investment for later. So maybe I put all this work in, it doesn't work out this time, but a year later, it's like, oh, that's how I saw it. I needed to do this, to do that, but I didn't get the fast reward at the end.
So what did you think of the session?
This is one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. Like, it was so natural, and it was just really generous to look into my work and who I am and come up with really thoughtful questions. It's definitely a pleasure to be out here and doing this, having the panel on Alliance University in the middle of this environmental utopia. And I really appreciate all the time that you're taking to get to know what I do, and also letting me into your space and into your studies so that I can learn more about what you do. So thank you so much.